Have you ever witnessed a betrayal so brazen, so twisted, that it felt ripped straight from a scandalous TV? Drama picture a glamorous millionaire, the devoted wife who carried his child for 9 long months, and a shiny honeymoon plan that hid a secret so dark it would captivate the entire world. The lavish hotel corridors held more than just gossip. They housed evidence that would shatter reputations and turn a marriage into a battlefield. Prepare yourself for a story of love, seduction, and betrayal on a scale you never thought possible, a cautionary tale that proves money can buy many things, but never loyalty. Bianca Hall was not born with a silver spoon. She grew up in the small town of Norwich, Connecticut, in a modest family with middle-class values. Her parents, Diana and Martin Hall, ran a local bakery that barely managed to stay afloat. From an early age, Bianca understood the virtues of hard work and perseverance. While she and her younger sister Cynthia spent their weekends kneading dough and packing pastries, Bianca nurtured bigger dreams of traveling the world and savoring the finest luxuries life had to offer. Those dreams began to sprout wings when she won a full scholarship to Georgetown University. The city lights of Washington, D.C. were a far cry from the humble streets of Norwich, and at first she felt like an imposter among polished classmates. But it didn't take long for her confidence to shine. She majored in international relations, thinking a career in diplomacy would open doors to the sophisticated life she always craved. Her first job post-graduation was with an embassy in Berlin, a position that taught her about the upper echelons of society. She rubbed shoulders with ambassadors, business magnates, and even had a brief encounter with the famous investor Warren Buffett at a global finance event. Every conversation, every interaction was an opportunity to build connections, yet her personal life remained unremarkable. She dated occasionally, but never found someone who matched both her ambition and her hunger for adventure. Then, at a conference on sustainable energy hosted at the famed Hotel Adlon Kempinski in Berlin, fate intervened. That's where she met the tall, suave, and impossibly wealthy Marcus Everly. A British-born American entrepreneur, Marcus was famous in certain circles for his dynamic energy businesses and philanthropic endeavors in Africa. The rumor was that he had turned down an invitation to speak at the World Economic Forum, to attend this smaller event, purely for business reasons, but no one really knew the truth. During a welcome cocktail hour, Bianca found herself seated next to Marcus by chance. He was magnetic and charming, weaving stories of his entrepreneurial ventures with ease. Marcus had this subtle confidence that wasn't brash but commanded attention. He admitted he had come to Berlin to scout alternative energy solutions and maybe meet some interesting people along the way. By the end of the evening, he was thoroughly impressed by Bianca's intelligence and wit. A whirlwind romance ensued. The two discovered a shared love for classical music, exotic cuisines, and philanthropic projects. They explored Berlin's hidden gems together, from rooftop bars overlooking the Spree River to understated art galleries in Prenzlauer Berg. Through it all, Marcus was the perfect gentleman, showering Bianca with thoughtful gifts, from rare books on European diplomacy to an heirloom brooch once owned by his great-grandmother. It felt like the seeds of her dream were blossoming. Bianca saw a future filled with excitement, possibilities, and yes, that elusive luxury she always yearned for. If this man was a window into the life she aspired to, she was ready to fling it wide open. Little did she know how that very window would soon reveal more than she ever bargained for. It didn't take long for Marcus to sweep Bianca off her feet. 1 week after their first meeting, he invited her to a private dinner at the iconic Reichstag building, pulling strings to secure an exclusive table overlooking the Berlin skyline. Over a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon. They spoke about their dreams, hers of bridging cultural gaps with diplomacy, his of revolutionizing the renewable energy sector. After that night, their relationship soared at breakneck speed. Marcus split his time between London, Washington, D.C., and occasionally Dubai for business, yet he made it a point to meet Bianca in Berlin every weekend. He'd charter a small private jet, one of the perks of being a millionaire with powerful connections, and whisk her away to neighboring European cities on quick romantic getaways. They sipped cappuccinos at quaint Parisian cafes, soaked in the thermal baths of Budapest, and cruised along the shimmering canals of Venice. Bianca's life was beginning to resemble a fairy tale. Of course, the media took notice. Marcus Everly's name commanded headlines whenever he was spotted with a potential love interest. Tabloid reporters speculated on who this young, sophisticated woman was. Some claimed she was a supermodel he discovered at a Berlin fashion show. Others declared her a brilliant political mind destined to become a future ambassador. Bianca brushed off these rumors. She wasn't into the spotlight, nor did she care for the paparazzi. She was too busy falling head over heels in love. Their bond deepened with every shared adventure. Marcus introduced her to his trusted circle of friends. One of them was Robert Caldwell, a close business partner who owned a line of luxury resorts across Europe. It was Robert who arranged for them to visit his private villa in Tuscany, a trip that would later play a crucial role in shaping Bianca's perception of Marcus's lifestyle. At that villa, Bianca saw another side of wealth, the extravagance, the unwritten rules of high society, and the hush-hush deals conducted behind closed doors. Sometimes, though she'd catch Marcus making cryptic phone calls, he would step outside onto a balcony, lower his voice, and speak in urgent tones. When Bianca asked who it was, Marcus would smoothly sidestep the question. "Just business, my love. Don't worry about it." She tried to brush it off. After all, a man of his stature had responsibilities and secrets tied to his industry. But a quiet sense of unease began to tug at her soul. Despite that gnawing doubt, the romance progressed. On a snowy evening under the Brandenburg Gate's radiant lights, Marcus proposed with a ring so dazzling it could make the stars jealous. Bianca was breathless, tears streaming down her cheeks as passers-by applauded the romantic spectacle. She said yes, and in that moment she believed she had found her forever. But the world of the rich and powerful had its own gravity, one that she was just beginning to feel. Bianca had no clue about the labyrinth of ambition, temptation, and betrayal lurking beneath the polished surface of Marcus Everly's empire. She was too captivated by the promise of a life that outshined her wildest dreams. The wedding took place at a grand castle outside Edinburgh, Scotland, owned by one of Marcus's longtime friends, Lord Andrew Kensington. Invitations were gilded, sealed with a wax emblem of two entwined initials, B and M. Attendees flew in from across the globe, ambassadors, business tycoons, celebrities, and even a few politicians from the UK and the United States. Marcus spared no expense, ensuring every detail was meticulously orchestrated. Bianca wore a designer gown, straight off the runway of Milan Fashion Week. Its lace detailing and flowing train made her look like a regal queen. Marcus looked equally majestic in a tailored three-piece suit from London's famed Savile Row. When they walked down the aisle, the hush of reverence was broken only by the soft notes of a live string quartet. Yet behind the opulence, several subtle warning signs flickered. During the rehearsal dinner, Bianca overheard hushed tones among a few guests referencing Marcus's complicated love life. An older lady, Lady Harriet Bromley, famous in British high society for her sharp tongue, remarked that Marcus had too much charm for his own good. When Bianca sought clarification, Lady Harriet gave her a pitiful smile and said, "He's one to watch, my dear. Be vigilant." Bianca dismissed it as idle gossip. Every wealthy man of stature was bound to have rumors swirling around him. She was determined not to let speculation tarnish the most important day of her life. Still, doubt flickered in her heart when she noticed a woman with striking red hair flitting around the ceremony, a woman Bianca didn't recognize. She seemed to follow Marcus with her eyes, and once Bianca even caught them sharing an intense glance. When Bianca asked her maid of honor, Carla Addison, about the mysterious redhead, Carla just shrugged and said, "Maybe one of Marcus's business associates." Despite these niggling worries, the wedding day itself was immaculate. Vows were exchanged under an archway of red roses. Tears were shed, and the union was sealed with a passionate kiss. The reception was a decadent affair, featuring a gourmet Scottish-Italian fusion menu, endless champagne, and musical performances that stretched late into the night. Marcus's best man, Robert Caldwell, gave a lively speech describing his friend as a fearless entrepreneur and a man who knows what he wants. Bianca flushed with happiness, and perhaps a bit of champagne believed every word. Little did she know the woman with the red hair was no ordinary guest. Her name was Jessica Wilkins, a prominent interior designer from London, and someone with a history far more intertwined with Marcus than anyone let on. Looking at them, one might think Jessica was simply an acquaintance, but the glances they shared spoke volumes about what truly simmered beneath the surface. Soon after the wedding, Marcus whisked Bianca away on a one-week tour of the Scottish Highlands before they returned to their new home, an opulent penthouse in London's Knightsbridge district. Bianca assumed this was just a brief respite. The real honeymoon, according to Marcus, would happen months later when time permitted. She was unaware that Marcus had an entirely different reason for postponing their official honeymoon, a reason that would prove devastating beyond her wildest imagination. Life in London felt like an ongoing fairy tale, at least at the outset. Marcus had purchased a penthouse perched atop a luxury high-rise, offering a sweeping view of Hyde Park. The interiors were a testament to wealth: marble floors, hand-carved fixtures, and modern art pieces worth small fortunes. He also hired a personal chef and a staff of housekeepers to ensure Bianca never had to lift a finger. For a while, Bianca relished the change. She traded her embassy job in Berlin for a role as a freelance consultant on cultural diplomacy, working mostly from home. Her days were filled with philanthropic events and charity auctions, where she accompanied Marcus, dazzling the room with her intelligence and refined manners. The couple was featured in society pages often hailed as a power duo with philanthropic hearts. Whenever they stepped out in public, they radiated that newlywed glow. 2 months after the wedding, Bianca began to experience unusual bouts of nausea and fatigue. She chalked it up to London's notoriously unpredictable weather, or the stress of adjusting to a new routine. Yet the symptoms persisted. One morning, while Marcus was away on a business trip to Dubai, she finally decided to see a doctor. The results were life-changing. She was pregnant. Initially, she was flooded with joy. Having children was something she had always envisioned with Marcus, though they had not planned on it so soon. Without hesitation, she called him, voice trembling with excitement. On the other end, she heard a pause, a beat longer than she had expected, before Marcus responded with a mixture of surprise and a forced enthusiasm. That's wonderful news, Bianca. We'll celebrate when I'm back, he said, but his tone held a peculiar edge. Marcus returned a week later, showering Bianca with designer baby accessories from Gucci onesies to a crystal-encrusted pacifier. He arranged for her to see the best obstetrician in London, Dr. Lydia Shaw, whose clientele consisted almost exclusively of royals and celebrities. The gestures seemed loving, but Bianca couldn't shake the feeling that his smiles didn't quite reach his eyes. As her belly began to grow, so did the distance between them. Marcus's business trips became more frequent. He'd fly to the Middle East, Asia, or across the Atlantic at the drop of a hat. When Bianca tried to schedule quality time like a simple dinner or a relaxing weekend at their countryside estate, he always had a board meeting, a project that demanded his immediate attention, or an emergency that only he could resolve. Bianca wanted to be understanding. After all, that drive was what made Marcus successful. But loneliness loomed large in her marble fortress overlooking Hyde Park. Tensions flared occasionally. One evening after Marcus cancelled a long-planned dinner date, Bianca confronted him. He brushed her concerns aside with a dismissive kiss on the forehead, saying, "You're being hormonal." "Relax, darling." That night, Bianca cried herself to sleep, feeling an unsettling heaviness in her heart, a weight that no amount of wealth or prestige could ease. She had no inkling that these lonely nights were merely the quiet before an impending storm, a storm that would upend her life the moment the true nature of Marcus's business trips and personal entanglements were exposed. As her pregnancy advanced, Bianca found solace in small joys. She spent mornings painting in her sunlit studio, a hobby she had picked up in college, and afternoons browsing for baby essentials or strolling along the boutiques in Knightsbridge. Yet she sensed something was amiss in Marcus's world. Whispers circulated among his circle of acquaintances, and her intuition kept telling her that he was hiding something. Her suspicions deepened when she received an unexpected call from Carla Addison, her old friend and maid of honor. Carla, who worked in New York as a fashion buyer, recounted a bizarre story. She claimed to have seen Marcus at a lounge in Manhattan 1 week earlier, except Carla could have sworn Marcus was supposed to be in Shanghai for a business conference. More striking was that Carla saw him in the company of a red-haired woman who clung to his arm with an unsettling familiarity. The description reminded Bianca of that mysterious woman at their wedding. Bianca confronted Marcus that evening. His initial reaction was anger. He demanded to know why she was spying on him and insisted the redhead was just a colleague, Jessica Wilkins, an interior designer he'd hired to renovate one of his properties. He argued that he flew to New York instead of Shanghai on a last-minute deal. It's business, he insisted. Besides, Jessica's ideas are brilliant. I had to finalize some design details before we could move forward. But the logic didn't fully add up. Why would an interior design consultation involve a late-night lounge? Hoping to soothe Bianca's nerves, he announced a grand plan they would finally embark on their official honeymoon. "Let's do it before the baby arrives," he said, stroking Bianca's hair gently. "We'll go somewhere luxurious, a paradise to help you relax." Bianca, desperate to believe him, agreed. Despite feeling uneasy, she clung to the hope that this was Marcus's way of refocusing on their marriage and the imminent arrival of their child. Unbeknownst to Bianca, though, Marcus had made other arrangements that involved Jessica Wilkins. The honeymoon was booked at an exotic, ultra-private resort in the Maldives, one of Robert Caldwell's high-end properties. Marcus had reserved a breathtaking overwater villa complete with an infinity pool that melted into the turquoise ocean. The plan, however, was as twisted as it was cunning. He intended to travel there with Bianca, initially, then find a cover story to send her home early, so he could extend his stay with Jessica. What fueled this madness? For Marcus, it was a toxic blend of entitlement, a need for excitement, and a simmering desire for Jessica, who had been his secret lover long before Bianca entered the picture. Jessica, for her part, craved more than occasional trysts. She wanted Marcus to herself, his wealth, his influence, and the thrill of conquering a man who belonged to someone else. Together they orchestrated a plan so brazen it seemed destined to implode. But in their pursuit of dangerous desires, they grossly underestimated the resilience of a woman about to become a mother and the unpredictable twists of fate that awaited them at the lavish Maldivian resort. By the time Bianca reached her 9th month of pregnancy, her doctor advised against long-haul flights. But Marcus insisted. "This might be our last chance to holiday before the baby arrives," he said, his voice brimming with manufactured sincerity. The invitation was too tempting for Bianca to refuse. She was exhausted, weighed down by her swollen ankles and the emotional toll of suspecting her husband's fidelity. A heavenly retreat sounded like the perfect antidote. So off they went, boarding Marcus's private jet, bound for the Indian Ocean. It was a luxurious flight. Bianca reclined in plush leather seats, sipping herbal tea while flipping through a magazine featuring A-list celebrities on similar island getaways. In fleeting moments, she allowed herself to believe Marcus was truly concerned about her well-being. He assured her that he had arranged for a special on-site doctor at the resort, just in case she needed medical attention. Despite lingering doubts, she felt a glimmer of hope. Upon arriving in the Maldives, the couple was greeted by staff from Robert Caldwell's resort. Their villa was the epitome of luxury, a thatched roof over a spacious living area. Glass floors offering a view of vibrant coral reefs below, and a private deck that led straight into the crystalline lagoon. The sun-drenched sky overhead seemed to promise renewal, and for a short time Bianca relaxed in the illusion of marital bliss. But Marcus had an agenda. On the second day, he feigned a business emergency. "Robert needs me to accompany him on a day trip to meet with local officials he claimed wearing the apologetic look he had perfected over time." Bianca wasn't pleased. She had hoped for a couple's massage or a romantic dinner at sunset. Still, she tried to be supportive. The last thing she wanted was a confrontation that would mar what little peace she could find. Marcus left at dawn, and Bianca spent the day alone. She strolled along the powdery white beach, gazing at other honeymooners who seemed carefree and in love. By late afternoon, an uncomfortable tightness gripped her belly. Worried that it might be early contractions, she decided to head back to the villa to rest. That's when she spotted a boat in the distance approaching one of the resort's private docks. Through the lens of her sun hat's brim, she could make out Marcus's tall figure alongside Robert Caldwell and a woman with flaming red hair. Bianca's heart pounded. Could it be Jessica Wilkins? She watched as they disappeared into a secluded area of the resort just out of sight. Fear and suspicion wrestled in her mind. Was Marcus brazen enough to bring his mistress to their honeymoon destination? Later that evening, Marcus returned to the villa smelling of salt water and cologne. "The meeting ran long," he explained casually. "I'm sorry I missed our afternoon together." Bianca forced a smile, but an inner turmoil raged. She let him hold her, let him kiss her forehead, all while her mind replayed the image of Jessica's red hair flapping in the ocean breeze. A sleepless night followed. Bianca tossed and turned, haunted by the possibility that her husband was entertaining his mistress in the very place meant to celebrate their marriage. As dawn broke, she decided she would confront Marcus, though she had no solid proof yet. But fate has a way of delivering proof in the most unexpected manner. That day, one of the hotel staff, a young Maldivian woman named Arisa, approached Bianca with an air of urgency. She nervously explained that she had recognized Bianca from society magazines and knew she was Marcus Everly's wife. Arisa confessed she had stumbled upon security footage while performing her housekeeping duties. In one clip from the previous night, Marcus and a red-haired woman were seen entering a private suite near the spa. Bianca's trembling hands pressed against her pregnant belly as Arisa recounted the details. The footage showed them kissing passionately, Marcus's hand placed intimately on Jessica's waist. They appeared to be returning from a moonlit rendezvous. Arisa, empathizing with Bianca's visibly advanced pregnancy, couldn't stay silent. Bianca felt her world shatter in that moment. The scorching Maldives sun felt cold against her skin, and every breath came labored as if her lungs were drowning. Fear, betrayal, heartbreak all collided at once. She gripped Arisa's arm, tears pooling in her eyes. "Where can I see that footage?" she whispered, steeling herself for a devastating truth she already knew. Bianca barely slept the night after spotting Marcus with the red-haired woman near the private docks. Her instincts screamed what her heart refused to accept. Her husband, the man who had begged her to come on this final romantic escape before their baby arrived, had brought his mistress here, to their honeymoon destination, to the Maldives. Morning sun bled through the gauzy curtains of their villa, casting golden light over her troubled face. Her body ached not just from the weight of her pregnancy, but from the heaviness in her chest. Every movement felt slower, strained. She clutched her belly and whispered to her unborn son, "I'm sorry, baby. Mummy's trying." Then came the knock. It was Arisa, the young Maldivian woman, who had tidied their suite the day before. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder before slipping inside and closing the door behind her. Bianca's brows furrowed as she set aside her tea. "Mrs. Everly." Arisa began softly, her voice shaking. "I recognized you from the magazines. I know who you are, and I think you deserve to know something." Bianca straightened in her seat, her breath caught. Arisa clutched a folded piece of paper, handwritten directions. "Please don't tell anyone I told you. But I saw something. I work part-time with the security staff and sometimes help monitor the private bungalow area. Last night, I saw Mr. Everly with a red-haired woman entering one of the restricted spa villas. I couldn't stay quiet after that." Bianca's heart pounded. "Are you absolutely sure it was him?" "Yes. And there's footage. I saw it myself." Minutes later, Arisa guided Bianca through a back corridor of the resort, hidden from guests. They slipped into a narrow security room tucked behind the front reception. It smelled faintly of sea salt and disinfectant. On a sleek black monitor, Arisa clicked open a video file. The grainy footage flickered to life. Bianca leaned in. There he was. Marcus, dressed in linen pants and a short-sleeved shirt, confidently walking down the lantern-lit path beside the spa bungalows. And there, right beside him, was Jessica Wilkins, her unmistakable red hair catching the moonlight like fire. They were holding hands. Then, in a moment that shattered any remaining doubt, Marcus leaned in and kissed her slow and possessive. Bianca's stomach turned. Her body felt like it was shutting down. Arisa, watching her closely, whispered, "There's more." Another clip. Hours later, Marcus and Jessica emerging from the bungalow laughing. Jessica clung to his arm like she had claimed it. They didn't even try to be discreet. Bianca pressed a trembling hand to her swollen belly. Her skin went cold. Tears welled in her eyes but didn't fall. She refused to let them not hear, not now. "I need copies of this," she said hoarsely. Arisa nodded. "I'll transfer them to your room, TV. Discreetly. You'll be able to confront him if that's what you want." Back at the villa, Bianca paced, replaying the footage in her mind. Her limbs ached, and her heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was fact captured on camera, time-stamped, undeniable. When Marcus finally strolled in just after sunset, his shirt open at the collar and his hair still damp from a late swim, Bianca felt a surge of fury so intense it made her knees weak. She didn't speak. Instead, she grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. The screen flickered, then displayed the footage. Marcus froze. The confident grin on his face faded into disbelief. Then panic. "Bianca." "I don't," she said, voice cracking. "Don't insult me by lying again." He took a step forward. "It's not what it looks like." She let out a hollow laugh. "So the kissing. The bungalow. The hours you spent with her while I was here alone and 9 months pregnant. That's not what it looks like. It was a mistake." She showed up unexpectedly. She was upset. I didn't know how to turn her away without making a scene. Bianca turned to face him, eyes burning with a fury that had built for months. "You brought your mistress to our honeymoon, while your child is literally growing inside of me. How dare you?" Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but a sharp, stabbing pain suddenly ripped through Bianca's abdomen. She doubled over, clutching her belly. "Bianca!" He rushed toward her. She waved him off. "Don't touch me." Another wave of pain shot through her stronger than before. Her legs buckled, and she fell to her knees. Marcus, now terrified, reached for his phone. "I'm calling the doctor. Just stay with me, Bianca, please." But Bianca was focused on only one thing, the little life inside her, now responding to her stress and heartbreak. As Marcus frantically made the call, she whispered through gritted teeth, "You'll never come near him again. I swear it." The morning after Bianca confronted Marcus with the damning hotel footage, the ripples of betrayal began to churn into tidal waves. What started as a private heartbreak soon evolved into an explosive public scandal. A junior employee at the Maldivian resort had leaked anonymous tips to a gossip blog, which was quickly picked up by international tabloids. Within 48 hours, headlines blazed across digital screens from London to New York. Millionaire mogul takes mistress on honeymoon. Pregnant wife unknowingly shares resort. Honeymoon horror. Expecting wife walks in on husband's secret affair. Caught on camera. Marcus Everly's double life exposed in paradise. Bianca awoke in the resort infirmary. She had passed out from the stress and contractions, narrowly avoiding early labor, thanks to quick medical intervention. Her doctor insisted she remain under observation for at least 24 hours. The stress was deemed a dangerous trigger, and she needed immediate rest. But rest was impossible when the world seemed to be watching her every move. Back in London, chaos erupted. Outside their Knightsbridge penthouse, paparazzi camped in droves. Shouting reporters crowded the gates, hoping to catch a shot of the betrayed wife or the disgraced mogul. Even security struggled to manage the frenzy. Social media exploded with public opinion. Celebrities, influencers, and everyday people chimed in with their outrage and sympathy. Bianca's quiet grace and the image of her heavily pregnant frame, wrapped in a silk shawl as she boarded the plane home, became symbolic of strength in the face of unforgivable betrayal. The footage, though grainy, had done enough damage. Public perception swiftly turned against Marcus. For Marcus, it was a nightmare unraveling in real time. His PR team scrambled to contain the firestorm. They drafted statements claiming a misunderstanding, suggesting the footage was taken out of context, and the woman involved was a long-time business associate. But it was too late. The image of Jessica Wilkins with her unmistakable red hair and sultry smile had been burned into the public memory. Her name, once associated with high-end interior design, now trended on social platforms for all the wrong reasons. Jessica herself went into hiding. Tabloid reporters camped outside her London flat. Rumors circulated that she had fled the country entirely. Spain, Morocco, even Dubai were named. Some said she was receiving hush money from Marcus to disappear until the heat cooled down. Her firm quietly removed her profile from their website. Clients cancelled contracts. In a matter of days, her career crumbled. Inside the penthouse, Marcus raged. He shouted at staff, tore through papers, and hurled his phone at the wall when another investor dropped out of a lucrative deal. Board members from his energy company began raising concerns. A few resigned. Others demanded a formal review of his leadership. One prominent business partner issued a scathing public statement declaring his disappointment in Marcus's ethical failure and withdrawing future collaboration. Bianca, meanwhile, landed quietly in London with Carla by her side. They avoided the penthouse altogether and checked into a discreet hotel under an alias. From there, Bianca's doctor scheduled regular checkups to ensure the baby's health hadn't been compromised. Miraculously, Ethan was still thriving. But the emotional toll weighed heavily. Carla proved to be Bianca's rock. She handled calls, spoke to the lawyer, and filtered out toxic news updates so Bianca could rest. On one particularly difficult evening, Bianca sat on the hotel balcony watching the sunset as tears streamed down her cheeks. "I loved him," she whispered, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "I gave him everything. And he used our honeymoon to hide her." Carla wrapped an arm around her. "He may have fooled the world for a while, but not anymore. You have truth on your side now, and you have Ethan." Bianca nodded slowly. "He's the only reason I can breathe right now." A few days later, Marcus attempted to visit her at the hotel. Armed with flowers, luxury gifts, and a rehearsed apology, he tried to charm the front desk into letting him through. Security blocked him at Bianca's request. When that didn't work, Marcus released a statement to the press, claiming he was devastated by the recent breakdown in his marriage and committed to repairing the damage privately. It backfired. Public sympathy only grew for Bianca. A well-known talk show host even dedicated a segment to her story, calling it a modern-day cautionary tale about women trusting wolves in expensive suits. Then came the hospital visit. Bianca had gone into early labor. The stress and exhaustion had finally caught up with her body. Carla rushed her to London Maternity Centre, where doctors worked through the night to stabilize the delivery. After 12 grueling hours, Bianca gave birth to a baby boy, Ethan Martin Everly. The moment Ethan's cries echoed through the delivery room, a rush of emotion consumed Bianca. Love, pain, triumph, and fear all collided as she held her newborn in her arms. His tiny face scrunched, his fists curled tightly. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "I'll protect you, no matter what it takes." Carla cried beside her, overwhelmed by the beauty of the moment. In contrast to the media storm outside, that hospital room became a sanctuary of peace and beginnings. Outside reporters swarmed. Rumors of the birth had leaked, and everyone wanted the first glimpse of the scandal baby, as one tasteless tabloid called him. But Bianca wasn't giving them a show. When Marcus arrived hours later, security refused him entry once again. Bianca had made her wishes clear. No visits, no contact, no grand gestures. He sent flowers and letters to her hospital room, but she had them all removed. In one note, he had written, "I want to be part of our son's life. Please let me make this right." Bianca didn't even open it. She wasn't ready to hear promises anymore, especially from a man who shattered every vow he had ever made. As news of Ethan's birth circulated, the public embraced the narrative of Bianca as the fierce new mother standing against betrayal. Women across the globe rallied behind her, sending messages of support and solidarity. Hashtags like #StandWithBianca and #JusticeForEthan trended for days. And though Bianca had yet to speak publicly, her silence became its own powerful message. She was done giving Marcus her voice. Her focus was her son, her next move. To ensure Ethan's future would never be dictated by his father's lies. She was no longer just the woman he betrayed. She was the woman he underestimated, and the mother who would now take him to court. 2 weeks after giving birth, Bianca was cleared by her doctors to leave the hospital, though her heart was still far from healed. She didn't return to the opulent Knightsbridge penthouse, the site of too many broken promises, but instead moved into a discreet, high-security serviced apartment near the River Thames. The location had been arranged by Patricia Morgan, her lawyer, to shield Bianca and baby Ethan from the relentless paparazzi. Carla Addison stayed with her, becoming more than just a best friend. She was a support system, a second mother to Ethan, and a fierce protector. She fielded phone calls, kept reporters at bay, and held Bianca through countless nights when the pain refused to fade. Despite the elegant interior of the apartment, the mood inside was heavy. Bianca was navigating sleepless nights, not only because of her newborn, but also due to the legal war that loomed like a thundercloud overhead. Marcus predictably launched a full-scale charm offensive. He sent flowers, grandiose, fragrant arrangements that filled the lobby until the concierge politely asked them to stop. He wrote long, self-pitying emails, left voice messages saying he had made a mistake, and once even tried to visit Bianca unannounced. When he pounded on her door demanding to see his son, Carla stood between them with fire in her eyes and warned she'd call the police if he didn't leave. "You've lost the right to shout on her doorstep," Carla hissed. "Get a lawyer." And he did. Marcus retained an elite legal team from a firm notorious for handling the divorces of celebrities and politicians. The firm's reputation was built on suppressing scandals, spinning media narratives, and settling out of court. But Patricia Morgan wasn't intimidated. She knew their tactics, and more importantly, she had irrefutable evidence, the hotel footage, eyewitness testimony, and public sentiment on her side. Bianca's main goal wasn't financial revenge. She told Patricia clearly, "I want to protect my son. Marcus can't be trusted with a child's future when he couldn't even respect his wife during her most fragile moment." Patricia nodded. "Then we go for sole custody. No loopholes, no shared holidays. You'll have control, and he'll have to prove himself legally and morally before getting even supervised visits." Bianca braced herself. She had weathered public humiliation, but now she had to face Marcus in person at a formal legal mediation session held in Patricia's office. A conference room that usually hosted business negotiations was now a war room. Bianca sat at one end of a long mahogany table, Ethan sleeping in a sling across her chest. Her hair was neatly pinned back, and she wore a navy blue dress, simple, elegant, and resolute. Marcus arrived 10 minutes late, flanked by 3 lawyers in bespoke suits. He looked worn down, his once proud posture now slightly hunched, his eyes bloodshot. When he saw Ethan for the first time, he faltered. His voice cracked as he said, "He's beautiful. He looks like you." Bianca said nothing. She didn't need to. The meeting began with Patricia presenting Bianca's demands: full legal and physical custody of Ethan, a generous financial settlement, and a complete gag order, preventing Marcus from spinning the story publicly in a way that would harm Bianca's name or Ethan's future. Marcus's lawyers countered quickly, offering a substantial lump sum of money enough to keep Bianca in comfort for the rest of her life if she agreed to joint custody, and issued a statement downplaying the alleged infidelity. Bianca's knuckles turned white. She shook her head. "No amount of money will buy back my dignity. I'm not settling so Marcus can pretend to the world that what he did wasn't monstrous." Marcus leaned forward, trying to sound reasonable. "It was an affair, Bianca. People make mistakes. It didn't change how I felt about you or about being a father." Bianca let out a humorless laugh. "Didn't change how you felt, Marcus. You brought your mistress on our honeymoon. I was 9 months pregnant, and you left me in that villa so you could sneak off to another woman's suite. And now you think I should let you help raise my son?" "You're emotional," Marcus said, frustration bleeding into his voice. "You're angry, and I get that. But this isn't just about us anymore. Ethan is my son too." Bianca leaned forward, meeting his eyes squarely. "No. You lost the right to say that when you chose deception over decency. If you cared about Ethan, you would have chosen honesty. You would have protected his mother, not humiliated her." The air in the room tightened. Even Marcus's own legal team seemed to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Patricia pounced on the moment. "If your client wishes to avoid further public disgrace," she said coolly, "I suggest he reconsider his position. We're prepared to go to court with additional footage. Depositions, witnesses. This will not end well for him." Marcus turned red. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact," Patricia replied. "And facts don't bend for billionaires." After 3 hours of impasse, no agreement was reached. But it was clear who held the stronger hand. Marcus's empire was cracking under media pressure and investor scrutiny. Every day the case dragged on, Bianca's reputation soared, and his plummeted. Back in the apartment, Bianca collapsed into the couch as Carla brewed her tea. She looked down at Ethan's tiny face, his fingers curled around hers. "He's why I can't give up," she whispered. "He deserves a father who doesn't treat people like chess pieces." Carla nodded. "And he has a mother who's willing to fight to the end." Bianca didn't know how long the legal battle would stretch, or what tricks Marcus might still try. But she did know one thing for certain. She would not be bullied, bribed, or broken. She may have been shattered in the Maldives, but here in London, she was reforging herself. Not as Marcus Everly's wife, not as a tabloid headline, but as Ethan's protector, as a woman who had walked through betrayal fire and public disgrace and come out stronger. Justice wasn't just about court rulings. It was about drawing lines, holding ground, and never again letting someone decide your worth. And Bianca Hall had drawn her line in unshakable stone. As the scandal surrounding Marcus Everly's betrayal spiraled into an international tabloid frenzy, Bianca Hall found herself at the center of a media storm she never asked for, but would come to master. The public had caught wind of every sordid detail: the footage from the Maldives, the mistress on the honeymoon, and the pregnant wife blindsided in paradise. While some skeptics whispered cruel suspicions of gold-digging and fame-chasing, the overwhelming tide of public sympathy leaned heavily in Bianca's favor. Her poise, her pregnancy, and her refusal to retaliate publicly painted her not as a victim, but as a woman of immense strength. Behind the flashing cameras and paparazzi flashbulbs, however, the real war was waging in courtrooms and legal chambers. Bianca's lawyer, the seasoned and tenacious Patricia Morgan, mounted a case that would leave Marcus's legal team scrambling. With decades of experience navigating high-profile divorces, Patricia moved with clinical precision, turning the betrayal into a timeline of calculated deceit. One of the turning points came when a former staffer from the Maldivian resort submitted a sworn affidavit. The statement confirmed that Marcus had explicitly arranged for Jessica Wilkins to have her own private bungalow, mere steps from the suite he shared with his heavily pregnant wife. The intent was clear, and the court took notice. No one could claim it was a spur-of-the-moment lapse. This was premeditated infidelity on an unimaginable scale. Still, Marcus's team wasn't backing down without a fight. They flooded the court with arguments portraying Marcus as a misguided but devoted man who simply made an unfortunate mistake. Marcus himself took the stand during one critical hearing. Once a picture of polished confidence, he now looked pale and exhausted under the courtroom lights. His voice cracked as he addressed the judge, admitting to the affair, but insisting it had nothing to do with his role as a father. "I was under immense pressure," Marcus claimed. "I acted out of confusion and stress, not because I don't care about Bianca or my child. I love my son. I want to be a father to him." From her seat across the courtroom, Bianca listened in silent fury. Every word Marcus spoke felt like an erasure of her agony, of the nights she cried herself to sleep, of the moment she watched that security footage while gripping her unborn child. Her composure never cracked, but her eyes told the truth: she would never forgive what he had done. Patricia's cross-examination was swift and merciless. She reminded the court of the extensive planning Marcus had put into the honeymoon, the trail of receipts, the video timestamps, and the secrecy that made it all possible. She highlighted his manipulation, his gaslighting, and most of all his indifference to Bianca's emotional and physical well-being during her most vulnerable stage of life. Jessica Wilkins, meanwhile, became a ghost. She vanished from the UK social scene entirely with whispers, suggesting she had been paid handsomely to lie low, possibly in Spain or Morocco. Her refusal to testify further weakened Marcus's credibility. Every day, she remained absent, reinforced the image of Marcus as a man who not only betrayed his wife, but dragged others into a web of moral rot. In private meetings, Marcus's attorneys proposed a jaw-dropping financial settlement. Bianca was offered a sum that could buy entire apartment buildings in London, but Patricia already knew her response. "It's not about the money," Bianca said firmly. "I don't want Ethan growing up thinking loyalty has a price tag." She demanded full legal and physical custody of Ethan. Marcus could have supervised visits, but she refused to let him become a part-time father when he couldn't even respect his full-time vows. The money would never erase the footage burned into her memory, the look on Marcus's face as he kissed Jessica under the same stars meant for their honeymoon. As the court proceedings dragged on, Bianca faced the grueling reality of raising a newborn amid turmoil. The public watched her every move. but behind closed doors, she was still healing. Postpartum recovery. Sleepless nights and the emotional trauma of betrayal left her drained. Carla remained her rock-juggling baby feedings and PR statements like a seasoned bodyguard and best friend rolled into one. Then came the final hearing. The courtroom was packed. Journalists lingered outside, ready to blast breaking headlines the moment the ruling dropped. Marcus looked deflated in his bespoke suit, his arrogance reduced to nervous glances and fidgeting fingers. Bianca, by contrast, looked radiant. Tired, yes, but resolute. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, and Ethan asleep in a baby carrier beside her. The judge's voice echoed across the chamber as she read her ruling based on overwhelming evidence of adultery, premeditated deceit, and emotional negligence. Full legal and physical custody of Ethan would be granted to Bianca Hall. Marcus would receive no visitation until a psychiatric evaluation and supervised family sessions could determine if he was fit to be involved in his son's upbringing. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Patricia allowed herself a small smile. Bianca closed her eyes, exhaling the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The financial settlement was also approved, giving Bianca long-term financial stability, but the focus remained squarely on Ethan's welfare. Marcus, his face pale and jaw clenched, exited the courthouse under heavy security. He didn't answer a single question from the press. Outside, cameras swarmed Bianca. Carla stood beside her, holding Ethan protectively as microphones were thrust forward. Bianca didn't break stride. She paused briefly to speak into one mic. "I'm not here to celebrate," she said. "I'm here to rebuild. For my son. For me." Then she walked past the chaos, disappearing into a black car that drove her away from the courthouse and the wreckage Marcus had made of their marriage. In the days that followed, Marcus stepped down from multiple corporate boards under pressure from investors and PR advisors. Some of his partnerships dissolved entirely. Jessica Wilkins was never heard from again in public circles. And Bianca. She packed her things and returned to her roots. Back in Norwich, Connecticut, at the same modest bakery where she'd once kneaded dough as a teenager, Bianca began to rediscover her strength. She took joy in the ordinary rocking Ethan to sleep during soft New England sunsets, serving cupcakes to longtime neighbors, and feeling the quiet peace of a simpler life. No designer gowns, no gala dinners, just the warm scent of bread baking and the heartbeat of her son close to her chest. Her past with Marcus would never be forgotten, but it no longer defined her. She had chosen justice, and justice had chosen her too. Thank you for joining us on this tumultuous journey of love, betrayal, and ultimate redemption. Bianca's story reminds us that truth will surface no matter how cleverly it's hidden, and that the greatest strength often emerges when we're protecting what we love most. In the end, justice found its way, but not without heartbreak and a profound lesson on the cost of blind trust. If this story captured your attention and left you yearning for more dramatic twists and turns, help us continue sharing incredible tales just like this one. Like this video, share it with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring forward more stories of triumph, resilience, and cautionary wisdom for everyone to see. Thank you, and stay tuned for our next gripping narrative that you won't want to miss. The air in the grand ballroom of the Astoria crackled with the energy of 1,000 champagne flutes and $1 million in whispered deals. This was the night of the Croft Innovations Gala, the crowning social event of the year. But beneath the shimmering crystal chandeliers, a different kind of currency was being traded: reputation. And a beautiful, smug woman named Isabella Rossi was cashing in. She stood near the stage, a diamond necklace glittering on her throat, a gift from the man of the hour, telling anyone who would listen that she had won. She had won the man, the empire, the future, the defeated wife. An irrelevant ghost. But ghosts have a way of showing up when you least expect them. And in just a few moments, the entire room would learn that a queen never loses her throne. She simply waits for the perfect moment to reclaim it. Eleanor Vance Croft knew the exact shade of lipstick Isabella Rossi wore. It was called Victory Red. She knew because she'd found a tube of it in the glove compartment of her husband's Bentley, tucked away like a dirty little secret next to a spare pair of cufflinks. For 6 months, Eleanor had lived with the spectre of Victory Red. She saw it in her mind's eye, staining the collar of Julian's custom-tailored shirts, imagined its scent on his skin when he came home late, feigning exhaustion from board meetings that stretched into the early hours of the morning. Julian Croft was not just a man. He was an institution. The charismatic CEO of Croft Innovations, a tech behemoth he had built from the ground up, with a little help from her family's initial seed investment, a fact he conveniently omitted in his many magazine interviews. To the world, they were the golden couple, Julian the visionary tycoon, and Eleanor the elegant architect wife, with a pedigree as flawless as her bone structure. They lived in a sprawling Manhattan penthouse overlooking Central Park, a gilded cage of Italian marble contemporary art and suffocating silence. The silence was the worst part. It had crept into their lives slowly, a fog that blurred the edges of their once vibrant love story. It started with cancelled dinner dates, then unanswered calls. Soon the silence was a third person in their marriage, vast and cold. Eleanor, a woman trained to see the structural integrity of things, saw the cracks forming in the foundation of her life long before anyone else. She confirmed her suspicions not with a private investigator, but with the cold, hard data she had access to as a signatory on their joint accounts. Flights to Santorini for 2 booked when Julian was supposed to be in Zurich. Charges from a boutique called L'Amour Fou for lingerie in a size that wasn't hers. And the necklace, the very same diamond lavalière Isabella was now flaunting at the gala, purchased from a private jeweler for a sum that could have funded a small startup. Eleanor didn't confront him. A storm of tears and accusations was what he would expect. It was what Isabella, with her dramatic, fiery personality, would have done. But Eleanor Vance was not Isabella Rossi. She was playing a different game, a longer game. Her pregnancy had confirmed that. 4 months along, she had told no one but her doctor. The tiny, fluttering life inside her was a secret she guarded with the ferocity of a dragon protecting its hoard. This child, the true heir to the Croft legacy, was not a bargaining chip. It was her reason to endure the whispers, the pitying looks from friends, the hollow ache in her chest. It was the reason she was now standing in the shadows of the Astoria's grand ballroom, watching the woman who had tried to ruin her life soak in a spotlight she hadn't earned. Her best friend Chloe materialized by her side, her expression a thundercloud of concern. "Are you okay, Elle? You don't have to be here. We can go." Eleanor offered a faint, serene smile, her hand resting instinctively over the slight curve of her stomach, hidden beneath the deep sapphire silk of her gown. "Oh no," she whispered, her eyes fixed on Isabella, who was now laughing, her head thrown back as she held court with a circle of fawning journalists. I wouldn't miss this for the world. The show is just about to begin." Chloe looked from Eleanor's calm, determined face to the garish scene across the room. She didn't understand, but she trusted the quiet strength that had always been Eleanor's core. Julian was on stage now, a vision of corporate power in a bespoke tuxedo. He was giving his keynote address, his voice smooth and resonant as it filled the vast hall. He spoke of legacy, family, and integrity, words that dripped with a poison only Eleanor could taste. He thanked his board, his employees, and then with a brief, almost dismissive glance towards the back of the room, he said, "And of course my wife, Eleanor, for her unwavering support." A smattering of polite applause followed. From her vantage point, Eleanor could see Isabella preening her lips curved into a smug, triumphant smile. She believed that lukewarm acknowledgement was a public dismissal, a final clearing of the stage for her own grand entrance. She thought she was the star of the show. Eleanor took a deep, steadying breath. She had spent months planning this night, every detail as meticulously designed as one of her architectural blueprints. She had endured the pain, swallowed the betrayal, and channeled her heartbreak into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. Isabella thought this was her coronation. She had no idea it was her execution. Isabella Rossi believed in destiny. She believed that some people were simply meant for greatness, for the spotlight, for a life adorned with diamonds and adoration. And she had never doubted, not for a single second, that she was one of those people. From her cramped apartment in Queens to a junior PR position at Croft Innovations, she had clawed her way up with a potent combination of ambition, ruthlessness, and an almost supernatural ability to be exactly what powerful men wanted her to be. With Julian Croft, she had been a breath of fresh air. Where Eleanor was quiet poise, Isabella was loud passion. Where Eleanor was classical music and art galleries, Isabella was yacht parties and impromptu trips to Monaco. She saw herself not as a home wrecker, but as a rescuer liberating a titan of industry from a dull, sterile marriage. "She's like a beautiful museum piece," she'd once told Julian, curled up against him in a hotel suite that cost more per night than her old monthly rent. "You're supposed to admire her, but you can't touch her. She's cold." Julian, caught in the intoxicating whirlwind of her youth and adoration, had simply nodded, letting her words paint a narrative that absolved him of his guilt. He needed to believe Eleanor was the problem, that their marriage was a hollow shell to justify the thrill he felt with Isabella. Isabella's campaign had been strategic. It began with accidental appearances at his regular lunch spots, then progressed to expertly timed emails with brilliant PR ideas late at night. She manufactured a crisis with a tech blogger that only she could fix, earning his gratitude and, more importantly, his attention. The affair that followed felt to her like an epic romance, a story that would one day be told with envy and admiration. Her jealousy of Eleanor was a ravenous, gnawing thing. It wasn't just about Julian. It was about everything Eleanor represented. The old money grace, the effortless class, the respect she commanded, without ever seeming to ask for it. Isabella studied photographs of Eleanor, mimicking her style, but adding a flashier, more modern twist. She bought the same brand of perfume, but wore twice as much. She wanted to erase Eleanor, to overwrite her, to become a better, brighter version of the woman Julian had married. In the weeks leading up to the Croft Innovations Gala, Isabella grew bolder. Her social media, once a curated stream of professional posts, began to feature cryptic hints of her new life. A photo of 2 champagne glasses with a Manhattan skyline view, captioned "To New Horizons." A shot of her hand adorned with a new diamond bracelet, resting on the leather interior of a luxury car, captioned, "Some drivers are better than others." Every post was a subtle poisoned dart aimed directly at Eleanor. Tonight was to be her masterpiece. Julian had told her to be discreet, but Isabella had no intention of staying in the shadows. Discretion was for mistresses, and in her mind, she had already been promoted. She was the CEO-elect of his heart. She found her opening with Marcus Thorne, a well-known columnist for a major business journal. Positioning herself near him, she let out a sigh that was perfectly pitched between weary and blissful. "It's been such a whirlwind," she said, when he inevitably asked how she was enjoying the evening. She touched the diamond necklace, a gesture she had practiced in the mirror. "Julian is a force of nature. Keeping up with him is a full-time job." The implication was clear. Marcus, smelling a story, leaned in closer. "You two seem very close." Isabella gave him a smile that was both dazzling and conspiratorial. "Legacy isn't just about business, you know," she whispered, her eyes flicking towards Julian on the stage. "It's about the future. It's about finding a partner who shares your vision, your passion, your fire. Sometimes you have to burn down the old structure to build something magnificent and new." It was a direct quote, a perversion of something Eleanor had once said in an architectural magazine about historic preservation. The cruelty was the point. The columnist's eyebrows shot up. This was more than he could have hoped for. Buoyed by her success, Isabella moved through the crowd, a shark gliding through shimmering waters. She spoke to board members' wives, dropping Julian's name with an intimacy that bordered on possessive. She hinted at redecoration plans for the penthouse, a new summer home in the Hamptons. She was writing the story of her victory in real time, speaking it into existence. When Julian finished his speech, the applause was thunderous. He descended the stage, looking for all the world like a king returning to his court. His eyes met Isabella's across the room, and he gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. To him, it was a gesture meant to placate her, to keep her happy for the night. To Isabella, it was a coronation. This was her moment. The official program called for a brief Q&A with the press, but Isabella saw an opportunity. She made her way to one of the floor microphones, her heart pounding with exhilaration. The room was buzzing. The energy was perfect. She felt the weight of hundreds of pairs of eyes on her. This was her stage now. She ignored the frantic warning look Julian shot her way. He was weak, she thought, afraid of the necessary unpleasantness of the transition. She would be strong for both of them. "Isabella Rossi from your own PR department," the moderator said, a little confused by her approach. "Actually," Isabella said, her voice smooth as silk and twice as strong, amplified throughout the grand hall, "I'm here to speak on a more personal note." A hush fell over the ballroom. This was not on the program. This was drama. "Julian just spoke about legacy." She began, her gaze locking with his. "And I believe a true legacy is built on truth and passion. It's about letting go of the past to embrace a brilliant, vibrant future." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, thick with insinuation. "I just want to say publicly how proud I am to be a part of that future. Julian and I believe..." But what she and Julian believed would be lost to the ages, because at that exact moment, the grand double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung silently open. While Isabella was busy weaving her web of whispers and innuendo, Eleanor was orchestrating a war. Her strategy sessions didn't take place in tearful phone calls with friends, but in the sterile, soundproofed conference room of Davies, Thorne and Associates, a law firm known for handling the most brutal corporate and divorce battles in the city. Davies was a man in his late 60s, with eyes that had seen every form of human treachery. When Eleanor had first walked into his office 2 months prior, he had expected a standard case, a wealthy, heartbroken wife seeking a punitive settlement. What he got was a cold, calculating CEO in the making. "I don't want to ruin Julian," she had stated in their first meeting, her voice devoid of emotion. "I want to acquire him, his company, his legacy, everything he thinks he's taking from me to give to her." The plan she laid out was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. Mr. Davies, a man not easily impressed, had leaned back in his leather chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. This was the kind of case that made legends. Eleanor's first move was forensic accounting. She didn't just want proof of the affair. She wanted proof of his misuse of corporate assets. Working with a team of accountants, Davies provided she meticulously traced the financial bleed. The consulting fees paid to a shell corporation that traced back to Isabella. The company jet being used for romantic getaways under the guise of investor meetings. The lavish gifts, including the diamond necklace, all funneled through unaudited expense accounts. It was a pattern of reckless, arrogant embezzlement. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a breach of his fiduciary duty to the company and its shareholders. Her second move was leveraging her own power. The little help her family had provided to start Croft Innovations wasn't so little. The Vance Trust held a 17% stake in the company, making her the largest single shareholder outside of Julian himself. For years, she had given him her proxy vote, a silent, trusting partner. No more. She began making quiet, discreet calls. She started with Amelia Hart, a board member who had been with the company since the beginning and had privately expressed concerns about Julian's increasingly erratic behavior and lavish spending. Eleanor didn't approach her with gossip about an affair. She approached her as a fellow major investor, laying out the cold, hard data of the financial misuse. She showed her the flight manifests, the fraudulent invoices, the offshore accounts. "He's compromised Amelia," Eleanor had said, her voice calm and steady over the phone. "His personal recklessness is now a direct threat to the stability of this company, to our investment." Amelia, a shrewd businesswoman, was horrified and impressed. She pledged her support and the support of the shareholders she represented. Eleanor moved on to the next name on her list, and the next. She collected proxy votes like a general gathering troops, building a silent army within Julian's own ranks. Many were investors who felt ignored by Julian's flashy new money style and yearned for the steady, principled leadership that Eleanor's family name Vance represented. The final, most crucial piece of her plan was the corporate bylaws, a document she had read until she knew it by heart. Tucked away in Section 9, Article 4, was a morality clause, a relic of a more puritanical era, but still legally binding. It stated that the CEO could be subject to immediate removal by a majority vote of the board and shareholders for any action that brought public scandal, disrepute, or ridicule to the Croft Innovations brand. Julian, in his arrogance, had likely forgotten it even existed. Isabella, in her public boasting, was about to trigger it like a tripwire. The day of the gala, Eleanor spent the morning not at a spa, but back in Mr. Davies's office. The dossier was complete. It was a thick, heavy binder filled with bank statements, sworn affidavits from disgruntled former employees, and high-resolution photographs of Julian and Isabella in various exotic locales, all taken by a discreet security firm. On top of the binder lay a single-signed document, an emergency petition to call a shareholder vote, citing Section 9, Article 4. "Are you ready for this, Eleanor?" Mr. Davies asked, his tone unusually gentle. Eleanor looked down at the documents, the culmination of months of silent, meticulous work. She felt a profound and heavy calm. The grief was still there, a cold stone in her heart, but it was now surrounded by a fortress of purpose. She wasn't just a scorned wife. She was a protector of the legacy she had helped build, and a protector of the child who would one day inherit it. "He chose the stage," she said, her voice firm. "I'm just writing the final act." She left the law firm and went home to the silent, empty penthouse. She stood before her full-length mirror, looking at the woman staring back. The last 6 months had etched new lines of strength around her eyes. She placed both hands on her belly, where a gentle flutter reminded her of what was at stake. "It's just you and me now," she whispered to the child. "Let's go show them what a legacy really looks like." She chose the sapphire gown, not just for its beauty, but for its symbolism. It was the color of royalty, of depth of ice. When she walked into that ballroom, she would not be a victim. She would be a queen, arriving to restore order to her kingdom. And as she heard Isabella's voice begin to echo through the hall, she knew her moment had arrived. The storm she had gathered was about to break. From his position on the stage, Julian Croft felt the familiar, intoxicating surge of power. The applause washed over him, a physical manifestation of his success. The room was filled with the most influential people in the city, and they were all here for him. He was the sun, and they were the planets orbiting in his golden glow. His speech had been a triumph. He'd hit all the right notes, innovation growth, a nod to the future. He'd even managed the perfunctory mention of Eleanor without his voice catching. For a fleeting moment, a sliver of guilt had pricked him. The memory of the intelligent, vibrant woman he had once loved. The woman who had stood by him when Croft Innovations was nothing more than a dream sketched on a napkin. But he'd pushed it down, burying it under the more exciting, more immediate thrill that Isabella provided. He saw her across the room, resplendent in red, the diamond necklace he'd bought her sparkling like a captured star. She was bold, beautiful, and a little reckless, and he loved it. She made him feel young again, breaking the staid, predictable rhythm of his life with Eleanor. He knew he should have been more careful, but his arrogance had grown in lockstep with his company's stock price. He felt invincible above the petty rules of morality that governed lesser men. He saw her approach the microphone, and his blood ran cold for a second. "What is she doing?" He shot her a warning glare, a sharp, angry narrowing of his eyes. This was not the plan. The plan was a quiet, civilized divorce, in a few months, a carefully managed PR statement, and a gradual introduction of Isabella as his new partner. It was supposed to be clean, controlled on his terms. But as she began to speak, a part of him felt a perverse thrill. Look at her, so fearless, claiming him in front of everyone. It was a testament to his power that a woman like this would risk everything for him. His fear was quickly replaced by a wave of ego. Let them whisper. Let them stare. Soon enough, everyone would know. Perhaps a public spectacle was better, a clean break, instead of a slow, managed bleed. He was Julian Croft. He could survive a scandal. He might even profit from it. His mother, Catherine Croft, was seated at the head table just below the stage, a formidable matriarch with iron-grey hair pulled into a severe chignon. She was the embodiment of old-world decorum and pragmatism. Her face was an unreadable mask of stone, but Julian knew she was seething. Catherine cared about two things above all else: the family name and the company's bottom line. A messy public affair threatened both. Julian made a mental note to smooth things over with her, later promising that this was all part of a larger, brilliant plan. He tuned back into Isabella's words, a small, self-satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Embrace a brilliant, vibrant future," she was saying. It was almost poetic. This was the story he would tell the world. His first marriage had been a comfortable, stable foundation, but his future required a different kind of partner, one with fire. Then the world tilted on its axis. The opening of the ballroom doors was not a dramatic, crashing event. It was a silent, sweeping motion, as if the doors themselves were bowing to the woman who passed through them. Eleanor. It took Julian's brain a moment to process what he was seeing. She wasn't supposed to be here. She had declined the invitation weeks ago, citing a headache. He had been relieved. Her presence would have been an awkward complication. But this was not the quiet, retreating Eleanor he had been living with for the past year. This woman was a different creature entirely, dressed in a column of sapphire silk that seemed to drink the light from the room. She moved with a grace and purpose that was nothing short of regal. She didn't look angry. She didn't look heartbroken. She looked powerful. And then he saw it, the subtle but unmistakable curve of her abdomen, a shape that the flowing fabric of her gown could no longer completely conceal. Pregnant. The word exploded in his mind, a silent, devastating bomb. Pregnant how? When he did a frantic calculation in his head. It had been months since He had been so careful, so distant. His mind reeled a maelstrom of confusion, shock, and a sudden, terrifying dread. The entire ballroom had fallen into a pin-drop silence. Isabella, mid-sentence, had frozen at the microphone, her mouth slightly agape, the triumphant words dying on her lips. All eyes, hundreds of them, were fixed on Eleanor as she glided through the parted crowd, which seemed to instinctively move aside for her, as if for royalty. She wasn't looking at him. Her gaze was fixed on the stage, her expression serene, her chin held high. She looked like a queen about to address her court after a long and trying war. Julian felt a primal fear he hadn't experienced since he was a young man, risking everything on a single desperate business loan. He had grossly, catastrophically underestimated her. He had mistaken her silence for weakness, her stillness for surrender. He had been living in a king's delusion, believing he controlled the board, the narrative, and the women in his life. He realized now, with a clarity that was both ice-cold and burning hot, that while he had been playing checkers, Eleanor had been playing chess. And as she reached the small set of stairs leading to the stage, he had the sickening feeling that she had just said one word: checkmate. Isabella felt the power of the microphone in her hand, like a scepter. The silence of the room was her symphony, and she was the conductor. Every eye was on her. She had Julian's attention, the media's attention, the entire New York high society's attention. This was the moment she had dreamed of, the culmination of all her planning and seduction. "Julian and I believe," she repeated, her voice ringing with confidence, "that a company's soul is a reflection of its leadership. It must be honest, bold, and forward-looking." She glanced at Julian, expecting to see admiration, perhaps a touch of loving exasperation at her boldness. Instead, she saw a flicker of raw panic in his eyes. He was looking past her towards the back of the ballroom. A frown creased Isabella's perfect brow. She had his attention. Why was he looking away? Then a collective gasp rippled through the crowd, a sound like the tide being suddenly pulled from the shore. The whispers that had been buzzing all night ceased, replaced by a profound, unnerving quiet. The sea of elegantly dressed guests parted, creating a wide aisle from the main entrance straight to the stage. And walking down that aisle was Eleanor Croft. Isabella's first reaction was a jolt of fury. How dare she? How dare this ghost of a woman show up here tonight of all nights to try and spoil her moment? But the fury was quickly extinguished by a cold wave of disbelief. Eleanor looked different, transformed. There was a luminous quality to her skin, an unshakable poise in her posture. She wasn't the sad, defeated wife Isabella had imagined her to be crying into a pillow in that cold, empty penthouse. This was someone else. Then Isabella's eyes, like Julian's, fell on the gentle swell of Eleanor's abdomen. Pregnant. The word hit Isabella with the force of a physical blow. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Julian had assured her his marriage was a formality, a sterile, loveless contract. A child and heir was never part of the equation. This changed everything. A mistress with a billionaire was a scandalous headline. But a wife with the billionaire's legitimate heir, that was a dynasty. Her boast just seconds before, so powerful and bold, now hung in the air, sounding cheap, desperate, and foolish. The faces in the crowd that had been looking at her with fawning curiosity were now turning towards Eleanor with something else entirely: respect, intrigue, and a dawning understanding. Eleanor walked not with haste, but with a deliberate, unhurried pace. She didn't look at Isabella. She didn't even seem to register her existence. Her eyes were fixed on a point just beyond the stage, as if looking towards a future Isabella could not see. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a heavy, weighted silence, thick with shattered illusions and the promise of a reckoning. The clinking of glasses, the hum of conversation, the soft music from the orchestra. All of it had vanished, sucked into the vacuum created by Eleanor's presence. One could have heard a diamond drop. Isabella stood frozen, the microphone still clutched in her hand, suddenly feeling garish and exposed. Her victory-red lipstick felt like a clown's smear. Her borrowed diamonds felt like glass. The narrative she had so carefully constructed, the story of her epic love and inevitable triumph, was disintegrating in real time. She was no longer the exciting future. She was a tawdry, temporary distraction. Julian on stage seemed to shrink. The powerful, charismatic CEO was gone, replaced by a man trapped in a spotlight, his face pale, his eyes darting between the two women, his past and his future, colliding right before him. Eleanor reached the foot of the stage. She paused for a moment, her gaze sweeping across the front row, lingering for a fraction of a second on Julian's mother, Catherine Croft. The old woman's face was as impassive as ever, but her eyes, sharp and intelligent, were locked on Eleanor. And for the first time that night, they held a flicker of something other than disapproval. It looked like calculation. With the grace of a dancer, Eleanor ascended the 3 short steps onto the stage. She walked directly towards the main podium, where Julian had given his keynote address just minutes earlier. She moved as if she owned the stage, as if she had been born to stand there. She stopped at the podium, placing her hands lightly on its sides. She still hadn't looked at Julian or Isabella. She looked out at the silent, captive audience. She took a single deep breath, as if to center herself, and then she began to speak. Her voice, unlike Isabella's, was not loud or theatrical. It was quiet, clear, and resonant, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. And every single word landed with the devastating force of a precision strike. "Good evening," Eleanor Croft said, her voice as calm as a frozen lake. "My husband, Julian, spoke tonight about legacy. I'm here to talk about it too. A legacy. Eleanor continued, her voice holding the entire room in a state of suspended animation. Isn't just about stock prices and market caps. It isn't something you can acquire or steal. A legacy is built. It's built on integrity, on sacrifice, and on truth. It is carried in the blood, and it is nurtured for the future. She paused, letting her hand drift down from the podium to rest for the first time publicly on the gentle curve of her stomach. And our future, the future of the Croft legacy, is right here. A collective audible gasp swept through the ballroom. It was one thing to see it. It was another to have it confirmed. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was an announcement, an anointing. Julian looked as if he had been turned to stone, his face a ghastly shade of white. Isabella, still standing awkwardly by the floor microphone, seemed to physically deflate, the arrogant fire in her eyes, sputtering out, replaced by a dawning, horrified comprehension. Eleanor's eyes finally moved to her husband. There was no fire in her gaze, no hatred, only a profound and chilling disappointment. My husband also spoke of family and the importance of a strong partnership. I couldn't agree more, which is why it is so deeply regrettable when the funds meant to secure a company's future are instead used to finance a cheap and tawdry affair. The word cheap was delivered with such surgical precision that several people in the front row actually flinched. Isabella turned a shade of scarlet that clashed horribly with her dress. "I speak," Eleanor said, turning her attention back to the audience, "of over $2 million in embezzled corporate funds. Funds funneled through a shell LLC named IR Creative Solutions. I believe the IR stands for Isabella Rossi. Funds used for private jets to Santorini, for suites at the Hotel de Paris Monte Carlo, for designer clothes, and for this." As she spoke, the massive screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the Croft Innovations logo, flickered to life. It was not a PowerPoint presentation. It was a bank statement, a page from a corporate American Express account, with line items and dates and amounts, all highlighted in yellow. Santorini Villa Rental, $50,000. L'Amour Fou Boutique, $22,000. Bastion. Private Jewelers, $250,000. The final charge was dated just 6 weeks ago. It was for the necklace Isabella was currently wearing. Isabella's hand flew to her throat, as if the diamonds were suddenly burning her skin. The screen changed again, showing a flight manifest for a Croft Innovations private jet with 2 passengers listed Julian Croft and Isabella Rossi. It changed again, a copy of the LLC registration for IR Creative Solutions, signed by Isabella herself. This was no mere accusation. This was an indictment presented with the cold, irrefutable finality of a prosecutor's closing argument. This is not just a personal betrayal. Eleanor's voice cut through the stunned silence. It is a betrayal of every shareholder, every employee, every person who has put their trust in this company. It is a gross violation of a CEO's fiduciary duty. She picked up a sleek leather-bound folder from the podium, which had been placed there earlier by a trusted associate. Which brings me to the Croft Innovations corporate bylaws, specifically Section 9, Article 4, the Morality Clause. A low murmur spread through the room. The board members present knew exactly what she was referring to. It states that any action by the CEO that brings public scandal, disrepute, or ridicule to the company is ground for immediate removal by a majority shareholder vote. Eleanor's gaze swept the room, meeting the eyes of Amelia Hart, then 2 other senior board members. she had spent weeks courting. She saw their grim, determined nods. Her silent army was ready. Ms. Rossi's little performance here tonight was most helpful, Eleanor said with a touch of ice. She provided the public scandal. She patted the folder, will provide the majority vote. The Vance Trust, combined with the proxies I have secured from other concerned shareholders, now represents 54% of the voting power of this company. 54%. The number landed like a death knell. She had control. Julian finally moved. He took a staggering step forward, his hand outstretched. Eleanor, don't. We can talk about this. Privately. His voice was a hoarse, desperate croak. Eleanor looked at him. Truly. Looked at him, and for the first time all he saw was a stranger. The time for private talks is over, Julian. You made this public. She turned her back on him, a gesture of finality more brutal than any slap. Then the moment happened. The moment that would be recounted in society circles and boardrooms for decades to come. Catherine Croft, Julian's mother, rose from her seat at the head table. Her face a mask of aristocratic stoicism. All evening had finally cracked. But it wasn't with anger at Eleanor. It was with a cold reptilian fury directed at her own son. He had not just embarrassed the family. He had threatened the empire. He had been weak, foolish, and sloppy. Eleanor, on the other hand, had been strong, strategic, and brilliant. She hadn't come to destroy Croft Innovations. She had come to save it from the rot within. She was protecting the legacy, the name, the fortune. She was protecting the future, who was now her unborn grandchild. Catherine walked slowly, deliberately to the foot of the stage. She did not ascend it. Instead, she stopped directly in front of Eleanor, who turned to face her. The two most powerful women in the room held each other's gaze. Then, in a gesture of breathtaking feudal power, Catherine Croft, the matriarch of the dynasty, inclined her head and gave a short, sharp, formal bow from the waist. It was not a gesture of subservience. It was an act of fealty, an acknowledgement of a shift in power, a public transfer of allegiance from the disgraced king to the ascendant queen. That was the signal. Amelia Hart rose, followed by her husband. Another board member, a powerful venture capitalist, stood and inclined his head. Then another and another. Across the ballroom, shareholders, investors, and key stakeholders, who understood where the power now lay, began to rise. Some inclined their heads. Others, seeking to make their allegiance clear, bent a knee slightly in a gesture of profound respect and self-preservation. They weren't just kneeling to Eleanor. They were kneeling to the new center of gravity, to the 54%, to the mother of the heir, to the woman who had just saved their investments from the whims of a fool. The sight was staggering, a wave of deference, a mass genuflection of the 1%. And standing alone, utterly abandoned, were two people. Julian frozen on the stage, his empire crumbling around him, and Isabella, by the microphone, a pariah in a red dress and stolen diamonds, her face a mask of utter soul-crushing humiliation. She had boasted that she had won. But as she watched the entire world kneel before the pregnant wife she had dismissed as a ghost, Isabella Rossi finally understood that she had never even been in the game. The silence that followed Eleanor's final pronouncement was a physical entity, a thick, suffocating blanket that smothered all sound in the grand ballroom. The image of the city's elite, its titans of industry and finance bowing and kneeling before the pregnant, sapphire-clad woman on the stage, was an image that would be seared into the collective memory of New York society. It was a seismic shift of power executed with the terrifying grace of an avalanche. The first to move was Mr. Davies Eleanor's lawyer, who had been standing discreetly near the side entrance. He glided through the petrified crowd and ascended the stage, standing a respectful pace behind Eleanor, a silent guard at the gates of the new regime. The spell was broken. People began to breathe again, to whisper, to slowly, awkwardly rise to their feet, their faces a mixture of awe, fear, and giddy excitement at having witnessed such a legendary takedown. Julian, who had been frozen in a tableau of pathetic disbelief, finally shuddered back to life. His eyes, wild and desperate, darted around the room, searching for an ally. A friendly face, a single person who wasn't looking at him with pity or contempt. He found none. He turned to his mother, Catherine, who was now standing erect at the foot of the stage, her expression as hard and unforgiving as granite. "Mother!" He rasped the word, tearing at his throat. "You can't let her do this." Catherine Croft looked up, not at her son's face, but at his chest, as if she were inspecting a disappointing piece of merchandise. "She isn't doing anything, Julian," she said, her voice carrying in the renewed quiet of the room. She is fixing the mess you made. You took our name, our legacy, and you used it as a napkin to wipe your mouth after a cheap meal. You are a fool, and fools do not sit at the head of this family or this company." Each word was a perfectly polished stone, hurled with deadly accuracy. She turned her back on him and addressed one of the family's private security guards with a simple, brutal command. "See that Mr. Croft gets home. His access to the corporate accounts and transport is to be revoked at midnight." Meanwhile, Isabella Rossi was attempting an escape. Her face was a grotesque mask of smeared makeup and panicked tears. The diamonds on her neck felt like a hangman's noose. She stumbled off the stage, avoiding the podium where Eleanor stood, a picture of serene control. Isabella tried to melt into the crowd, but it was like trying to hide in a hall of mirrors. Everyone saw her. Everyone stared. She saw a woman she'd had cocktails with just a week ago. Patricia Bainbridge, and made a desperate move towards her. "Patricia," she whimpered, reaching out a trembling hand. Patricia looked at Isabella's hand as if it were a diseased thing, took a deliberate step back, and turned to her husband. "Darling," she said, her voice dripping with ice, "I suddenly feel quite ill. This whole affair is just so dreadfully common." The public shunning was absolute. Isabella fled a pariah trailed by a wake of contemptuous whispers, her high heels clattering on the marble floor in a frantic, undignified rhythm, marking the end of her short, tragic reign. Eleanor remained on the stage. She did not rush to leave. She spoke in low, calm tones with Amelia Hart and the other board members who had joined her. She was not gloating. She was governing. She was already scheduling the emergency board meeting for 8 o'clock the following morning. She moved and spoke with the innate authority of someone who had always known how to lead, but had simply been waiting for the moment to take command. As she finally descended the stage, the crowd parted for her once more, a sea of respectful silence. Her victory was not loud or explosive. It was a profound, world-altering quiet. The emergency board meeting took place in the main conference room on the 50th floor of the Croft Innovations Tower. The long mahogany table, usually a stage for Julian's boisterous monologues, felt like a funeral slab. Julian was there as legally required, seated at the far end of the table from the chairman's seat. He was flanked by a high-priced lawyer who looked profoundly uncomfortable. Julian himself looked like a ghost. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes were sunken, and a tremor ran through his hands. Eleanor entered precisely at 8:00 a.m. with Mr. Davies at her side. She wore a simple but impeccably tailored grey dress. She did not take the chairman's seat at the head of the table. She took a seat directly in the center, the new locus of power. She nodded to the assembled board members, her gaze cool and professional. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "We all know why we're here. The events of last night have necessitated this meeting. Pursuant to Section 9, Article 4 of the Corporate Bylaws, I am formally calling for a vote of no confidence in Julian Croft as CEO and Chairman of the Board due to actions that have caused significant and material damage to the reputation and stability of this corporation." She didn't embellish. She didn't need to. The evidence compiled in neat folders in front of each board member spoke for itself. Financials affidavits. The story splashed across the front page of every major newspaper in the country. "I second the motion," Catherine Croft said from her seat, her voice like cracking ice. The vote was a formality, a swift and bloodless execution. One by one, the ayes came firm and resolute. A few of Julian's remaining loyalists, seeing the utter futility of dissent, quietly abstained. The motion passed. A corporate secretary placed the resignation papers in front of Julian. His hand shook so violently he could barely hold the pen. He looked up, his eyes finally landing on Eleanor, pleading. He saw no flicker of pity, no residue of the love they once shared. He saw only the cool, dispassionate gaze of his replacement. He signed his name, the ink scratching against the paper, the only sound in the room. The final humiliation came minutes later. As he was packing the few personal items from his desk into a cardboard box, a framed photo of them in happier times, a silver pen, set a foolish little trophy from a charity golf tournament. The head of corporate security appeared at his door. "Mr. Croft," the man said, his tone respectful but firm, "will escort you from the building." The walk from his office to the elevator past the desks of employees who studiously avoided his gaze was the longest of his life. He was no longer Julian Croft, the Titan. He was just a man with a box of pariah in the kingdom he had built. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor worked with a relentless, focused energy. Her first act as interim CEO was to hold an all-hands meeting. Standing before the company's 1,000 employees, she was candid and direct. "There will be a new era at Croft Innovations," she announced. "An era of transparency, accountability, and integrity. We will no longer be a company driven by ego, but by innovation. We will no longer value flash over substance. Our work will speak for itself. Your work will be valued. Your contributions will be recognized." The speech sent a shockwave of relief and renewed purpose through the company. The toxic, sycophantic culture Julian had fostered began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of collaborative energy. Eleanor promoted Amelia Hart to Chief Operating Officer and began elevating other competent executives who had been sidelined by Julian's cronyism. Her nights were spent in the penthouse, which she was slowly transforming. The cold, minimalist art Julian had favored was replaced with warmer, more personal pieces. The silence was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful. Chloe would come over, and they would sit and talk for hours. Not about the past, but about the future. "I still can't believe it," Chloe said one evening, watching Eleanor sketch out ideas for a new childcare facility on the Croft campus. You didn't just leave him. You dismantled him." Eleanor smiled faintly, her hand resting on her growing belly. "I didn't want his money, Chloe. I wanted his power, not for me, but for this." She patted her stomach. He was going to squander it on shallow things and shallow people. This legacy, the one my family helped start, deserved better. My child deserves better. The legal and financial fallout for the vanquished continued. The civil suit against Isabella Rossi resulted in a summary judgment in Croft Innovations' favor. Unable to pay, she filed for bankruptcy. Paparazzi caught a photo of her working as a hostess at a mid-range restaurant in New Jersey, her face pale and anonymous, the victory red lipstick gone forever. She had become a footnote in someone else's epic. 5 months after the gala, Eleanor gave birth to Alistair Vance Croft. Holding her son for the first time, Eleanor felt a profound sense of completion. Every difficult choice, every sleepless night, every moment of pain had led to this perfect, tiny being in her arms. He was not the product of a broken marriage. He was the reason for a new beginning. Catherine Croft sent an exquisite antique silver rattle with a simple handwritten note, "For the heir." It was not a grandmother's loving gift. It was a monarch's acknowledgement of the line of succession. Eleanor integrated motherhood and her role as CEO seamlessly. Alistair became a beloved fixture at the office, and her ability to command a boardroom while simultaneously knowing her son's feeding schedule became legendary. She proved that strength and compassion were not mutually exclusive. One afternoon, a year after that fateful night, Eleanor stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of her office. On her desk lay the blueprints for a new research and development campus she had designed herself, a beautiful, innovative space that merged cutting-edge technology with sustainable architecture. It was the perfect fusion of her two worlds. Alistair, now a babbling, curious toddler, played on a soft rug at her feet. She looked down at him, then out at the sprawling city below. The view was the same, but her perspective had changed entirely. It was no longer a gilded cage, but a kingdom of possibilities. A gossip site had recently published a blurry photo of Julian looking paunchy and lost on a beach somewhere, with a headline that called him the Forgotten Tycoon. Eleanor felt nothing. He was a ghost from a different lifetime. She knelt down and pulled Alistair into her arms, holding him close. He smelled of milk and innocence, and the boundless promise of the future. The scar on her heart from Julian's betrayal remained, but it no longer ached. It was a reminder like the structural lines on a blueprint, showing where the original design had failed, and where a stronger, more resilient foundation had been built in its place. She had lost a husband, but she had found her purpose. She had secured her legacy not by marriage, but by merit. She was Eleanor Vance Architect and CEO Mother and Queen. And as the sun set over her city, casting long shadows that looked like roads leading to the horizon, she knew her greatest work was just beginning. Eleanor's story is a powerful reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. It's a testament to the fact that true strength isn't about loud boasts or public declarations, but about meticulous planning, unwavering resolve, and the courage to act when the time is right. She turned her deepest pain into her greatest weapon, not for simple revenge, but to protect her legacy and build a better future for her child. She didn't just win a battle against a cheating husband and his mistress. She won control of her narrative, her company, and her life. If you were moved by Eleanor's incredible journey from a gilded cage to a well-earned throne, please take a moment to show your support. Hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed the story. and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of justice, empowerment, and unforgettable drama. Thank you for listening.